Since the last video about our growing collection of antique sewing machines, my wife and I have added 15 to the collection and thought it was time for an update. First up, we have Ruby May, a 1958 Model 1 Mino made by the Russian Tula manufacturing plant. Besides her retro styling, her most interesting feature is that she has a port for a hand crank attachment, which would have been useful in Russia at the time because many areas were still without electric power. While most Minos are pale green or beige, we're lucky to have one of the much rarer maroon versions, though to our eyes she looks more like candy apple red. These Singer Model 221 featherweights have become a favorite among vintage sewing machine collectors, and for good reason. They're durable, compact, lightweight, sew great, and have a beautiful understated elegance. This one's in perfect condition and required no restoration at all. If you want one of these little beauties, it pays to shop around. In recent years, they have become highly sought after, which has driven their price up. Many sell for as much as $1,000, but the patient shopper can still find great machines for as little as $300. We named ours Margie May. Here we have Polly, a 1923 hexagon, manufactured for Sears by the Standard Sewing Machine Company. The same machine with different decals was also sold as the Harris No. 5. It's a 3/4 size machine with almost perfect decals and still runs smoothly. Betsy was made in 1922 by the National Sewing Machine Company. National made thousands of these and rebranded them for many different retailers. The Stitchwell brand was for Montgomery Ward. The decal sets were almost all the same except for the brand name, which was added separately. Consequently, many of these machines have the brand name decal at a slight angle to the filigree decal. Classed as a toy, she's really a cast iron heavyweight that can keep up with the big boys when mounted on a treadle. We estimate Danny May was made in 1921 by the National Sewing Machine Company for Montgomery Ward. She's a step up in quality and complexity from Holly, the National-made Brunswick sewing machine, featured in our last video about our collection. This 1918 Singer Model 15K features the attractive gingerbread decal set. Built to last, after more than a century of use, Peggy May still works great, and it's entirely possible she'll be sewing tight seams for another century. This is Mystery May, so named because when we found her collecting dust in a Salvation Army store, she had no identifying marks to provide even a hint of what she was. We eventually figured out she was a 1915 New Home Model U, also referred to as a New National. These machines were also sold with the Home Companion and Longford names. Mystery uses a bullet shuttle and a vibrating frame. Poor old Mystery is a mess. Rust everywhere, jammed parts, a cracked handle, worn and chipped paint, not a trace of her original artwork, and a bent crank arm put her one step short of the landfill. Yet we plan to bring her back to as-new condition. Wish us luck. We're going to need it. This is our 1921 Franklin, manufactured by the Domestic Sewing Machine Company for Sears. Her Egyptian-style decals are an artistic paraphrasing of Singer's Lotus decal set. She's similar to a Singer Model 27. Since we named our Singer Sphinx Cleopatra, we decided to follow suit and name this machine Nefertiti. Missy is a 1910 Wilcox Gibbs chain stitcher on an American hand crank base, which is much rarer than the more common British hand crank attachment mounted on Lizzie May, who was featured in an earlier video. The difference is that the British crank uses a belt, whereas the American uses gears. We can already tell that the British base runs smoother and is much quieter. This 1905 Singer Model 24 industrial sewing machine has an interesting story. At the turn of the century, the war over which was better, lock stitch versus chain stitch, was still very active. The battle cry, "Why use two threads when one works as well?" was shouted by chain stitch enthusiasts everywhere, particularly in factories mass-producing clothes where the simpler chain stitch system saved time and money. The famous Wilcox Gibbs chain stitchers had been so successful, Singer decided to jump into the foray by releasing the Model 24. It was an instant success because, unbelievably, it ran even quieter than the Wilcox Gibbs, important when there are over 100 of them cranking away in a single room. It was also easier to use, just as reliable, and required less power. All in all, Singer released 9 different models of the 24. Ours is a 26. Some of them were for domestic use, but most for manufacturing. Zoe is an industrial model as indicated by the absence of anywhere to pull a spool of thread. This was because it was designed to use manufacturing-sized cones of thread to be mounted on its table. What we can say from our experiences is that as good as the Wilcox and Gibbs machines are, Zoe sews a much tighter stitch and a more even stitch, and that's pretty impressive. Crown sewing machines are extremely rare because they were only manufactured from 1880 to 1883 and only in relatively small numbers. They were made by the Florence Machine Company, which was originally the Florence Sewing Machine Company, maker of the famous and much sought after Florence sewing machine. The company changed its name in 1879 to reflect the fact that it had expanded its product line far beyond sewing machines. Taller than most machines in its class, this crown, who we've named Shirley May, has an upright at attention posture that reminds us of British Victorian standards. This 1880 Lanzer Model A is over 138 years old, yet still sews a great lock stitch. She uses a linear shuttle instead of the vibrating shuttle used in the earlier little Lanzers. Mechanically, she's in perfect shape. Well, with the exception of a non-original handle screwed into a new hole drilled into her main drive wheel. This issue is easily corrected. One fortunate discovery is that a Janome number 11 blue shank needle works perfectly in her, unlike the earlier little Wanzer, which required an odd, longer, thinner needle. The greatest challenge in restoring her is going to be her artwork, which is almost completely worn away. Repeated online searches have yet to turn up any Lanzer A sewing machines that have either been restored or machines in original condition with enough detail to show what they were supposed to look like. But we've come up with a few tricks for recovering long-faded artwork that gives us hope that one day soon, Emmy May will sparkle as brightly as she did when she first saw the light of day. Now we're getting serious. Angelica Mae is an 1875 American Model 1 made by the American Buttonhole, Overseaming, and Sewing Machine Company of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Designed for a treadle, its unique low-hung flywheel make her difficult to fit into regular treadle bases, which is probably why we got her for a song from eBay. And yes, after almost a century and a half, she still sews great. Here's a close-up of the central artwork on her base. It's humbling to think that 143 years ago, someone sat down and hand-painted these flowers. And here we are, all these years later, looking at them. It's comforting to know that some things really can last. Lastly, we have Flora, an 1869 Florence, an early cousin to the crown shown earlier. Like the Wheeler and Wilson, she uses a curved needle because the stitching arm moves up and down in an arc. A straight needle would stretch its hole into a football shape. Usually rare and expensive, we got this one for 1/3 the usual price because she's in such poor condition, with worn parts, missing parts, and heavily rusted. You see her here after 3 days of cleaning the worst of it off. Her paint is dull and chipped, and much of the artwork is heavily worn. She's going to be a challenge to restore, but well worth the effort to give her the chance at another 150 years of life. We hope you enjoyed seeing these machines. To see the entire collection, please visit our main website at waynesthisthandthat.com. And once again, thank you very much for watching.